So good and tasty?
When I created the series, there was a handful of movies that automatically sprang to mind, and some of them come from the Halloween franchise. So grab your modified Shatner mask, get some candy because Halloween Ends is good actually. Before we begin, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Now, back to the video. In order to understand my love for Halloween Ends, I want to briefly talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween duology. Rob Zombie, as a director, was never shy about exploring really disturbing subject matter, adding some hillbilly flavoring and a flashy visual style. While yes, the pacing and the narrative is a little bit wonky, the movie is ballsy and really tries to do something different with a decades-old film property. And of course, it divided hardcore fans in the original. Fans were mainly upset that, in a really big way, Zombie, with his lengthy Myers origin at the beginning of the film, demystifies the character. Despite a Rotten Tomatoes score of 28%, the movie was a huge hit, making a cool $80 million on a $15 million budget. This doesn't include home video sales and merchandise. Looking back at it now is really something, and it feels like the shock rocker was going for a true crime style template, something that feels more relevant now in a landscape dominated by true crime films, series, and podcasts. And maybe this is a hot take, but I don't mind them humanizing Michael Myers because, let's be real, the series has always had this strange relationship with this aspect. So, Zombie trying to make this a tragic tale of Myers being this societal monster is inherently more interesting, in my opinion, than what some of the other sequels try to do. Though being allowed to take things in his own direction, Zombie stated in various interviews that he found himself bound by certain limitations while directing the first Halloween. However, in the sequel, any restrictions he felt went right out the window, and wow, we really did get a completely bonkers end result. It's kind of a hybrid slasher and art house film. Though it didn't bomb, Halloween 2 wasn't a hit like the first film, and Zombie wouldn't come back for a third film. Flash forward, and the horror series went silent for 9 years until David Gordon Green took over in 2018, making the requel simply just called Halloween. Overall, the movie was praised by critics but still divided the fandom. Personally, I think the movie is just okay. Green's writing style is, shall we say, interesting. The film is littered with giant plot holes, weird plot threads that go nowhere, and somehow this line made it into the final product.
Oh man, I got peanut butter on my penis.
It also felt like Green was trying to speed run through a lot of material, like introducing an evil version of Dr. Loomis without ever really going anywhere with it. The theory at the time was the filmmakers assumed that this was just going to be a one-off, but of course it made a ton of money, breaking in over $200 million on a $10 million budget. So of course there was going to be more films. Green also caused a stir when he said that he was wiping the slate clean of every Halloween movie that came before it, even Halloween 2, which literally picks up seconds after the original. This led to the film's biggest retcon. Laurie and Michael are no longer siblings. Personally, I feel torn about this one. On the one hand, I agree it is scarier that Myers picked Laurie out at random, and it's this notion that anyone at any time can be a victim that is truly terrifying. On the other hand, though, while linking them by blood removes this random element, I believe it also offers a richer and more interesting motivation. And as it relates to this series, I feel like it handicaps it a bit, because now Michael and Laurie don't really have this connection, so it kind of leaves us wondering why he's so obsessed with this one woman who escaped him like decades ago. Halloween 2018 also explores Laurie's PTSD, which maybe is another hot take, but I think this was done better in Halloween H2O, which could definitely be its own episode. Despite the film being a mixed bag critically, the entire trilogy for Universal made a ton of money, even though each entry was made on a smaller and smaller budget. Halloween Ends takes place in 2019, a year after the event of Halloween 2018. we are introduced to Corey Cunningham, which could be a fun nod to Sean S. Cunningham, the director of the original Friday the 13th, considering that film was thought to be heavily inspired by John Carpenter's Halloween. Corey, without a shadow of a doubt, is considered one of the most divisive characters in the entire franchise, but more on that later. So, Corey is babysitting some brat on Halloween night, and right away, this feels like an interesting inverse of Laurie babysitting Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace. During the evening, Corey accidentally kills the kid and seemingly didn't do much time. Now he is labeled as a freak, and the entire town has made his life a living hell. Even the marching band abuses him. Just like Corey, Laurie is also viewed as the town pariah, and it seems fitting that her and Corey meet. Meanwhile, Laurie is writing a book as a way of fully coming out on the other side of her trauma. This is in stark contrast to Allison, who is having a harder time dealing with the death of her mother and friends. Allison is seen as a victim, unlike Corey and Laurie, who are viewed as the bringers of death and chaos. This leads to Allison feeling isolated as, like Corey and Laurie, it puts an unfair label on her, stripping her of any humanity. Fittingly, her and Corey meet, actually matched up by Laurie, and the two form this intense relationship. Oh, and Michael Myers is in this, kind of, and he and Laurie are going to finally have it out again for reals this time. Now, I admit I wasn't a big fan of this when it first came out, truth be told. I'm kind of lukewarm on the first two films in this trilogy. The writing is weak and the legacy characters aren't utilized in really interesting ways. Laurie is barely in the second part, which feels very much like a waste. Though, credit where it's due, that Loomis scene in Kills is fantastic. The makeup team and actor did a brilliant job, but the takeaway is, as a trilogy, it feels disconnected and a bit sloppy. But I'm here to praise ends, not to bury it, because at the end of the day, this is the most interesting Halloween entry in a long time. Unlike the fictional Derry Maine, which is almost like a character in and of itself in the Stephen King universe, Haddonfield has never been fully explored or even feel like a living, breathing town. In Halloween Ends, Haddonfield puts this sleepy town under a microscope and answers the question, what would a small community be like after a horrific massacre? Well, no duh. Turns out, not great. Everyone is angry, scared, paranoid, and trying to come to terms with losing loved ones. It's easier to invent rather than accept the truth that sometimes awful things just happen. For example, the locals don't see Laurie as some patron saint like Final Girl. No, they see her as the bringer of Michael Myers and by proxy the bringer of death. Two locals just flat out say that she sexually teased a mental patient, Myers, and then he snapped and killed everyone. Not only is this victim blaming to the max, but it harkens back to film scholars theorizing that the virginal Laurie, on a metaphorical level, opining for a tall, dark, mysterious man to enter her life, gets what she wishes for, and Myers is this dangerous sexual element made manifest. It makes this scene in particular more chilling.
I wish I had you all alone, just the two of us.
This angle of examining how the town views Laurie and Allison is so fascinating, and going in this direction is something I haven't really seen before in a slasher sequel/requel. I also read theories that green, using the Halloween 3 font, was a signifier that this was going to be radically different, and it's interesting that Part 3 is the only entry in the series that doesn't feature Myers, unless you count the TV promo for Halloween 78. But again, Myers is everywhere in this movie, just not physically, and I don't care if that sounds pretentious. There has always been a really interesting connection between Halloween 78 and 1960s Psycho. Dr. Sam Loomis is named after a main character in Psycho, and of course Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh. There have been nods to Psycho over the course of the film series. Here, Corey's mother is overbearing, and there's something kind of creepy about how close they are. No woman is good enough for him, and this certainly mirrors Mrs. Bates and Norman. It's a subtle homage to Psycho, and I loved it. Also, just maybe it's a side tangent, but Corey's stepdad is maybe one of the nicest people in the entire franchise, and his death is shocking and disturbing as hell. Please weigh in the comments and let me know what y'all think of that. So, yes, Corey definitely was one of the most divisive characters, and I do recall there being a huge backlash towards him. And I did find it pretty funny at the time, but as the film has grown on me over time, so did the character. Hot take, I guess number 3 is I now kind of think he's low key one of the more interesting characters in the series, not named Michael or Laurie. Here's the thing, Corey doesn't have that much depth to him. He's a brooding outsider who just wants to, as he puts it, burn it all down. What's interesting, though, is Corey is a direct byproduct of the Haddonfield massacre, and the town being quick to label him as a savage killer instead of trying to see the death he caused as a tragic accident is in itself a tragedy. In this sense, we feel like if Laurie wasn't as strong as Corey, would she too fall to the dark side? Linking these two characters together is a stroke of genius and adds another layer to what could have been a very humdrum outing. The finale between Laurie and Michael is interesting as it's not a big set piece, but it feels very much in spirit of this trilogy. However, the next scene is really what drives home everything the movie was building towards. After Myers is dead, there is a midnight burial with the entire town bearing witness. Laurie, and by extension the town, needed this to completely heal. It's a fitting finale to this movie, though again, I don't think it works as a cohesive trilogy. Halloween Ends and Halloween 2 feel very much akin, despite being so vastly different in virtually every way. Both David Gordon Green and Rob Zombie, with enough build-up goodwill from the studio, got to make something completely crazy and inventive. Ends is bonkers and cheesy, and let's be real, some of the dialogue is cringy, but I love this movie. I think it's borderline genius, and it's by far the best in the trilogy. So I hope y'all enjoyed that video. Please weigh in the comments and let me know what y'all think. Also, while you're here, please check out these other videos, and I'll see y'all in the next one.